11 with contemporary classical piano composer Philip Daniel. Today's episode 11, is with contemporary classical pianist and composer Philip Daniel. We sit down in today's episode to speak about his previous two albums titled Gradient and This Tree is Made for Climbing, and some unreleased music. So I actually had the opportunity to listen to some of these tracks that are unreleased. So if you are a fan of his music, we get into new unreleased music, which is awesome. But we sit down, talk about all of these albums, how he's transitioning into a bit of a different style with unreleased music, and really just dig into the creative process behind his music. So it's an awesome conversation for those reasons. A couple really awesome pieces to mention as well is Philip is really kind of celebrating right now Gradient passing 900,000 streams, as well as This Tree is Made for Climbing passing 100,000 streams on Spotify. So he just crossed that million mark. I mean, it's incredible. And when you listen to the music itself, of course, it makes sense. He writes beautiful, beautiful music. So definitely worthwhile to go and check that out if you have not heard his music yet. Now, other important things to talk about if you want to find him, if you want to listen to his music or even get in touch with Philip, you can find him on Spotify, of course, at Philip Daniel, also Philip Zock. So we get into that in today's episode. He switched names for, it's kind of a funny story, so we'll get into that. But also Instagram, so Philip Daniel Piano on Instagram and Philip Zock on Twitter. So go ahead, check out his music. If you'd like to reach out to him, do so. That's where you can find him. Aside from that, so this is a really, really, I really enjoyed speaking with him. I really enjoyed this episode. Before we jump into the conversation, we're going to play a clip of a track of his titled Unearthed. It was on This Tree is Made for Climbing. It's an amazing song. So I'm going to play about 45 seconds of it before jumping into the episode, just so you can really get a feel for what his music is like. Now, aside from all of this, totally switching gears, if you'd like to support the podcast, or if you just enjoy listening to these conversations and you want to show your support, really all I ask is just share this with friends, kind of spread the word about the podcast, and if you'd like, go rate and review on iTunes. That makes a huge difference so that this can continue to kind of have some traction, and people will continue to listen, and people will continue to come on as guests. So that's really it. I've had an absolute phenomenal time starting this podcast so far, being at episode 11, 12. It's been amazing, and I look forward to doing lots and lots more. So next episode is going to be with 28mm, so look for that. He's a techno producer. He writes incredible music, and I like that we're kind of jumping from contemporary classical, to techno, and we're going to kind of jump around everywhere from there. So look for that. That will be out the following week. It's going to be a very, very cool episode, I'm sure. We're recording that this evening, and that's it. I hope you enjoy this episode. Again, reach out to Philip, listen to his music. He's an awesome guy, and I will speak with everyone again soon. Cool. So thank you for being on today, Philip. I really appreciate it. Um, I wanted to do an episode dedicated to like a pianist and music composer, excuse me, related to classical kind of contemporary music. Stumbled across your music, so thank you for being on. First of all, I really appreciate
Yeah,
it.
absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm
Awesome.
stoked you found me. It's the day of Instagram.
I know the power of Instagram.
Yeah,
Honestly,
it's crazy.
yep. So, let's start out if you don't mind, and just kind of go back to when you started with piano and music in general, and what that was like.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like as most kids, I guess, I started reluctantly as like a 6-year-old in
Yep.
piano lessons. Never really like knew how much I liked it. But it was just my thing that I did, and I'm super thankful my parents never let me quit.
Yep.
Had incredible teachers and was pushed toward the classical. Just that like aspect of music.
Hmm.
Um, and just came like senior year in high school, and I'm like, well, I'm good at piano. I like it. So just majored it in college, and
Uh-huh.
still stuck to the classical performance. So I got
Cool.
my undergrad in it, and then went to grad school in Kansas City for a master's in classical piano. Um, so it was just kind of one of those things where like I loved it, and I never second guessed that's what like I needed to do with my life. So
Uh-huh.
I didn't have one of those moments just where I woke up and like it all clicked, but it was just
Yeah.
my whole life. I'm like, this is I think what I'm naturally gifted at, and I worked at it, so it kind of came together. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. So when you started out, one thing I definitely wanted to dig into was, you're mentioning that your parents were kind of pushing you into the classical music, et cetera. Did you find yourself writing music at a young age? Was that something that clicked early on, or did that come later in life? How did that work?
That's a great question. So I have family members who are like professional musicians. They're in a band, a rock band, tour
Hmm.
the world and do that thing. They kind of like opened my eyes up to that. Like you can create music,
Uh-huh.
because being in that structured field of classical, it was never an option. And like no one told me like, yeah, anybody can do this. So I kind of had that high view of composers and
Uh-huh.
people who wrote music, that it was some far off like thing that you were like just born with.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and I mean, my first like I actually didn't start writing until like 11th grade.
Hmm.
So like I mean, basically when I was like 16, 17, uh, and my first stuff was awful. But I mean, that's how
That's
that
how
I
it
mean
goes.
that's how it goes. But
Yeah. Yeah.
no, it was one of those things where I learned that like there is some innateness about it,
Hmm.
but a lot of it is studying, observing, being inspired by, and finding like what niche you want to start writing in, and then honing in on that, rather than
Yeah.
like you wake up and you're just like, I'm a natural amazing
Yeah.
composer. So it was
Yeah.
discovering that
Totally.
led me to. Yeah.
That's funny you mentioned that, because so when I was young, so I was kind of in the same boat. My mom pushed me into piano when I was really young. My mom's a pianist, grandma's a pianist, so uh, that was a big thing for me, right? They're gonna push me into that.
Yeah.
But I love playing guitar, so I was like really into like punk, pop punk, like Blink 182, Green Day, all
Dude,
that stuff when I was young.
my high school
Yep,
years.
exactly, exactly, exactly. But I remember having that same thought that these guys just have this innate ability to write music. There's something special about them that they
Yeah.
can write music for whatever reason. And I didn't understand till later in life. It really comes down to, and I don't know if it was like access to information with the internet or documentaries or what, but you find that these people who are super successful work extremely hard, and they
Yeah, for
start
sure.
out, yeah, yeah, and they start out and they even say their music's trash to start, and it's continually that hard work
Yeah.
that it changes over time.
I
Yeah.
totally agree. And there was a couple moments where like I was with my cousin or with somebody who like I personally knew, and
Hmm.
who like showed me how they wrote a song, or like told me like, try this. And so
Yeah.
it was those moments being connected to it, which I'm thankful for, rather than seeing like a far off, just putting people on pedestals. But yeah, so it's definitely something like to be worked at.
Hmm.
I still do. I mean, obviously think that some people, have a voice, and some innate, like I just think people are wired differently.
Hmm.
So I think there are people who like are naturally more prone,
Yeah.
but it's a
Oh, I would agree.
balance. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a balance. I think that the people that will end up sticking out at the end of the day in music or whatever it is, they have that innate ability that makes them maybe a little bit of an outlier,
Yeah.
and then they also, it's the combination of that and
Yeah.
working extremely hard. And
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. So if you don't mind, you were saying that you had family who was in like a touring rock band. What
Yeah.
was? Yeah.
That's
If you don't mind, I mean,
no,
that's
actually, I would love
yeah.
to talk about it because it's actually really near and dear to my heart.
Uh-huh.
I'm actually sitting in my cousin's recording studio. So
Uh-huh.
he was him and his three brothers. They started a band out of high school, and
Okay.
they actually made it pretty big. They're called Remedy Drive,
Okay.
but they're out of Nashville. And three of the brothers quit, and one of them formed is a producer for a living. He
Uh-huh.
writes music for Music Bed. I don't know if you've heard of them.
Oh, no. But so
So
he just writes the
so
music.
all he does is he produces his own music now for
Uh-huh.
TV and for commercials, for film,
Oh,
and
that's
he
so cool.
licenses it. So he just
Uh-huh.
sits here and writes albums of instrumental, and it gets
Oh,
picked up by
man.
producers. So it's actually kind of what I want to go into. But I
Yeah.
interned with him, and his brother's still in the band, and his brother is touring, but half of the year his brother works undercover, busting up like sex slavery rings in Thailand.
Whoa.
And so it's pretty crazy. And the reason I bring it up is just it's an incredible thing
No, yeah, that's
but
crazy,
and he's doing it, with his music. So he's
Yeah.
has a voice, and he's using it for good. And so their whole family's just been incredibly influential to me. So that's just a story of them, but
That's super cool because I think from an outsider, if someone doesn't have that influence when they're at that early stage in life or now especially, you might think, okay, well, I just have to get a regular job and I have to work and do these things to get paid. And you
yeah,
don't notice that there are people out there that they take the thing they're passionate about and they
yeah,
transform it, and they
absolutely.
use it and yeah.
Yeah, it's for me especially, like, because I'm here in the Midwest,
Hmm.
and so it's not the hotbed for the arts or for
Uh-huh.
music, but like having family and like who are doing what I want to do
Yeah.
in the same like area is huge,
Yep.
and seeing like how hard they worked and just all that is it's huge. So I'm
Yeah.
thankful, but
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. That's super cool. I think having those influences, that can really change lives. I mean, you look back to the people that really told you what you can do and what you can't do, and opened you up to different doors when you're young. And if you look, I mean, that has a huge positive or a huge effect on how you
yeah,
progress through life. So, yeah, that's super cool. Yeah, so it was cool to take that little tangent. That was
yes,
really interesting. You mentioned you just
def
yeah.
definitely go look up their music's incredible, and it's
Uh-huh.
it's more than just music to them, and so like definitely go Remedy Drive, and they work with an organization called Exodus Road,
Uh-huh.
and so they go over there, and just literally changing lives, which is I think
Yeah.
the point of your influence is doing something for good, and
Yeah.
using your music and what you have.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. There's a producer and I think I'm gonna pronounce it wrong. I don't listen to his music very often, but the reason kind of when you mentioned this, it reminded me of him. I think it's Blau. I think it's like 3LAU, but he takes a certain percentage of all of his streams and all of the songs he'll write on or release
Yeah,
rather on Bandcamp and put it towards charity. So, and it's a sizable amount. He'll release the numbers later and it's
that's
like,
cool. That's
yeah, it's like, yeah.
yeah. And then
It's,
it influences, not only other people, but like how they create their art too. And
yep.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
then yeah, you can see that, you get to do something that you really love and then at the same point it's helping people out there. I mean, that is really really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's really sweet.
Yeah.
So,
Thanks for letting me, share that. That's,
oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So let's dig in a little bit to you shared one unreleased album with me, which we'll get into here in a little
yes.
bit, but you have two released on Spotify, right? One under Philip Zach and then one under Philip Daniels or
Yes.
Daniel, excuse me.
So
Yeah.
just, like before we go any farther, there's
Yeah.
no way you would know this, but my last name is actually Zoc. So
Oh,
the
interesting.
ACH with the ZACH is like, not to compare, but like
Right, right.
Bach,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
German. So yeah, everyone,
Interesting.
there's no way to know that.
Yeah,
But
yeah, because it's spelled, but that's cool. Okay,
yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, so
Interesting.
I have two albums, and it's actually funny. Speaking of my cousin, so my cousin I work with, who's the producer, his name is Philip Zock too.
Uh-huh.
My
Okay.
parents have no creativity, and they named me the same, and so I had to literally change my Spotify name.
Uh-huh.
Hence why there's under two
Yeah,
of the
okay.
same
Yeah.
person on
Yeah.
Spotify. But
Yeah, I see. Cool.
yeah,
So two release albums on Spotify and I want to get into some of the tracks and kind of some of the inspiration and creativity behind those. When I was listening, so let me take a step back. So I've listened to those two albums, and then you share with me some unreleased albums, or one unreleased album, and the differences are there for sure. Like I see in the first two, and I'll let you, of course, explain it how you'd
Yeah.
like. But in the first two, it's contemporary piano with strings, and you kind of get a sense it's recorded and produced in a way that's very different than what you've just shown me. The second you
Yes.
pick up on all the elements of the room, you can hear the piano bench creak, you can hear
Yeah.
the keys, and I mean it's totally different vibes. So take us back a little bit to like those first albums and where you were kind of in that creative space
Yeah,
and inspiration
absolutely. This
there, and
is
yeah.
such a good question. So I mean, if you don't mind, I could just tell you the whole story of those albums.
Yeah,
I mean,
totally.
we have time. Uh,
Absolutely.
but so the first one in grad school, I started in undergrad, is kind of where I like just, I mean, obviously I was practicing Bach, Beethoven, Chopin hours a day, but I always found time, to write, but I had no pressure. So
Hmm.
I guess over the course of 5 years in my undergrad, had like 4 songs that I was like, okay, these are maybe of quality. And then grad school, like over the course of 2 years of just intense studying classical, I just kept up, in the back of my mind, like, okay, these, I'm starting to write a little better. And
Hmm.
so in the 6 years of like undergrad, grad, just in the back burner, I wrote like those 7 tunes of the first
Hmm.
album, Gradient. Um, and so they weren't like I was proactively writing. It was just something that I had came up with that stuck through the years.
Hmm.
And so in my head, I'm like, well, I have these 7 tunes. I want to record them. So down in Kansas City, at the conservatory I went to, I got like a crazy discounted rate in the studio. I got like a 40-hour rate in our
Hmm.
conservatory studio, which was a 10-foot Steinway Grand in a concert
Oh
hall.
yeah.
And so one morning I literally recorded the album in an hour, just
Whoa.
one take of each, and it
Oh,
was
that's
done.
awesome.
And so it's kind of funny, like there's production wise, studio wise. I mean, it was literally an hour of my time, mixed and
Hmm.
mastered in like half hour.
Yep.
Really no editing. So the story to that is pretty traditional in the
Hmm.
sense I just walked onto a stage and played. So I mean, in my mind, the compositions were the notes and the rhythm rather than the production.
Hmm.
I just knew I wanted a piano.
Hmm.
So I mean, back then I wasn't thinking about production or studio.
Hmm.
Um, and so it led to traditional, but I mean, I still value though the recordings. Um, and there's a type of simplicity about it. I think
Hmm.
that album, just based on where I was at. Yeah, so that was the story of that one. And then I actually recorded the second one. The piano is the same exact piano,
Okay.
because it was so cheap. And I knew the guy who did it, and I just
Hmm.
went down there one day to Kansas City and knocked it out like in an hour.
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously, a lot of like that product was the years of practice of like technically being able to play those.
Hmm.
Um, and I in all my music, I really want to encapsulate like a performance rather than manipulating and editing it into like,
Yeah.
to the grid or to the
Hmm.
making it perfect. So all the years of studying classical really instilled this value of like a good performance that's musical,
Hmm.
that's really raw and like genuine and not produced.
Hmm.
So those two albums are literally just me playing. And so the second one, actually, this is a crazy story and crazy timing. I met so there's strings on the second one.
Right. Right. Right.
I did none of those. So I recorded the song solo piano, and in the back of my mind, I knew that my music kind of wanted to like be married with strings,
Hmm.
and I felt like strings would just make it better and like fulfill the potential it had. But I didn't have any experience. I don't play. I've never composed. I don't even view myself as a composer actually. I just dabble. But I found a dude off Instagram,
Hmm.
because I knew I'm just trying to find a strings guy. This dude in Nashville actually reached out to me. He's like, "Hey man, I saw your stuff. I play violin." And so I sent him the tunes, and he did all that remotely,
Oh,
100% on
that's.
his own. Yeah,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it like couldn't have fit better. Like
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
it was
Yeah.
to me, it was just like the perfect union of elements. So,
Yep.
and it's crazy we have this interview now because I actually that was a year ago, and
Hmm.
this weekend I got in my car and drove to Nashville and finally met him for the first time.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so it was sweet just meeting him because he's meant so much to me because he's
Yeah.
like gave me this gift of finally realizing the potential of the music.
Yep.
So that's kind of the
Dude,
story of the first two. I don't know if you want me to keep
No,
talking about the third
absolutely,
one.
absolutely.
So I mean, ever since, I mean, you probably know like the process of making music from when you record it to when it comes out is a huge process of
Oh, yeah.
mixing, mastering, comping, finding artwork, all that.
Yep.
And so by the time I released it, my mind and artistic views were way on to the next thing. I started entering in the studio, so my eyes were opened up to like music and the elements of music, and decisions can be based off production rather than just like the classic piano or the classic strings.
Yeah.
And so I started to be inspired by the timbre of sound rather than just like notes and rhythm and harmony. And so I don't know if you've heard, have you heard of the composer Olafur Arnolds?
Oh, yeah, I was gonna get into that.
So
Absolutely,
he's my all-time, him and this dude named
Yeah.
Liebestraum are my two favorite composers in the world.
Uh-huh.
And they've heavily influenced me how to write classical music in this innovative niche, accessible, beautiful way. Their music is just absolutely incredible, and they showed me kind of this just like combination of simplicity, classical instruments, production, minimalism, that I've been inspired by. And so one of the big things is I started putting felt on my piano, which I was telling you about. And so the new album is a 100-year-old Steinway upright.
Oh, yeah.
I got for free from a piano tuner. Just gave it to me because it was crappy and old, and he's like, "I'll tune it for you, and you can have it."
Damn.
And so, yeah, it was sweet, and I'm incredibly
That's
blessed.
so lucky.
It's sitting actually, 10 feet away from me. So I took off all the wood on it, and I put felt over the hammers. So when the hammer hits the string or over the strings, you get a muted like percussive sound, which I'm sure you heard. And then I put the mics like 2 inches away, so you get like it's crazy close mic'd. So you just get a really percussive and the overtones. So you get that like weird, really intimate. And so I'm actually gonna call the album Between Us because I want it to emulate someone sitting there right beside me on a bench, and listening like they're in the piano, rather than the first two albums were very extroverted, like me in a hall, somebody in the audience. I want to kind of bridge the gap between listener and me as the performer. So actually the whole album I recorded in one take, one night.
Oh my God.
I just sat down and pressed record, and it was based off these little like ideas and melodies I had written on the piano. And I purposely didn't like compose them out because I knew that I wanted the recording to be a performance of a moment in time of improvised. So they're very, very improvised. Like most of it's improv. And it's just like what I was feeling in the moment rather than like me dictating and like structuring it.
Man.
And so that's the kind of the style and the what I was going for in the third one. Yeah, that was a long answer.
No, I loved it. No, seriously, that is so cool. I had no idea when I was listening to the tracks you had sent me, the unreleased ones, that was improv at all. I thought that those
that's
were
good
written, and then you sat down and because when I was listening to those tracks, you feel like you're right there, right? 'Cause you can hear all the elements in the room. You hear the reverb and like it picks up everything. So you feel like you're right there, which is amazing. And to that same point, you don't want to have that played perfect. You you want to save those imperfections because like then you're there in that moment. But I had no idea. I thought it would have been like pre-written and you had the idea from beginning to end, and then
so a lot of the melodies, I mean, were written, but like a lot of it is improv in like basically like I mean a lot of like just scales up and down, which like I'm sure you heard. But yeah, there are like I listen back and I even cringe because I mean there's mistakes I kept in there, which I mean are minute, but like it still captures like that one night. And the reason like what I learned through the process was just, you can have decision paralysis
Mm-hmm.
when like
Oh yeah.
making an album.
Oh
And
yeah.
yeah, and like literally I had been wanting to record the album for like months, and I
Uh-huh.
came to the studio, recorded it, didn't like what I did, left, and like that happened for like nights on end. So
Yeah.
that one night I was fed up with it, and I was exhausted, and just press record. I'm like, whatever I do, this is it. And so I just had to let go of control, which sometimes can lead to like, I mean, beautiful things if you
Yeah.
don't have that pressure on yourself of like um thinking too much about like the product, I think, and
Yep.
just thinking of what it means in the moment. But
Yeah. It's so cool that you mentioned that, because this has come up actually on a lot of episodes so far, is this idea of like flow state. So when you totally give in and you can kind of remove yourself, and at the neurological level, your brain actually starts working differently, but you feel this like loss of self, loss of time. And a lot of times people feel like that's when they produce the best kind of
yeah,
work. And it seems like you're like kind of saying the same thing when you just went in, you're like, this is it. I'm removing all the barriers. I'm just going to
yeah,
do it. You kind of got out of your own way, and then you're really
absolutely.
happy with
Yeah,
the result. Yeah.
that you said that so well. A lot of it too, I think, is based off fear of just like, I mean, the performance of when you're playing, of thinking of mistakes too,
Mm-hmm.
and not really like, okay, what am I trying to express? And I think often when you're in a studio setting, because I mean, by myself when the mic's not running, it's so easy to like be engaged in the moment.
Yep.
And so it's just, I think you're practicing just like every night, press and record, just so that you're used to being in that state rather than knowing a mic is,
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah. Just, excuse me. Yeah. Just kind of allowing yourself to just do it repetitively, like pressing
yeah,
record, just doing it. And then over time, you can kind of get a feel of just getting into that state a little
yeah,
bit better. Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at that.
Yeah,
That's really cool. I'm glad you mentioned Olafur I'm gonna
Arnold's.
Arnold. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm gonna mess. But I've been listening to his music as well as
oh,
once I started listening to your music.
it's
It's
gorgeous. Yeah,
amazing.
it's
And I listened to some interviews, and he said the most interesting thing around minimalist and contemporary music. And he said that when you remove instruments and you can limit yourself to maybe one or two instruments, that allows for more creativity, because you don't have these things you can go and pull in, and so you have
mhm.
to depend on that one single or two instruments to create what you want to do. And it can change, you have to be more creative in that space. So
Yeah.
I wanted to bring that up and just kind of mention how you address that when you're there with one or two instruments, and getting into a creative space. And then, I guess just your thoughts around that.
Yeah, it's actually funny you bring that up, because that, I know exactly what quote that is. I've seen that
Oh,
video many times, and that quote has actually like drastically impacted how I write music.
mm-hmm.
Um, and because like, I mean, I often like was in ruts composing, like I can't write a thing to save my life. And he's been a huge influence. That it's crazy you bring that quote up. That's creepy.
Yeah.
No, because I was actually going to bring that quote up too. Is just I mean, because this podcast is called Creativity.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but he, like, hearing him talk about that really like opened my mind up to like limiting your choices often enhances creativity.
mm-hmm.
And it like, I firsthand like saw the positive results in that, and just
Yeah.
like, especially compositionally and instrument wise too, like
mm-hmm.
for this album, I'm sure you heard the strings and stuff.
Yeah.
So I had Sean, the guy from the first album, do strings, and I told him, I'm like, I want 3 instruments: the felt
mm-hmm.
piano, strings, and maybe like this one synth.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think like putting it in a box first and then exploring it within that
Yeah.
leads to, because then you don't have all the options, so you have to make do with it. But then I
Right.
also like production wise and musically, I try to like only give myself a couple choices, but I also have been getting into like even harmony and melody,
mm-hmm.
and like compositionally doing the same thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember the one called Space for Two
Uh-huh. Oh
on
yeah.
but I named it that literally because I just used 2 chords. and like sitting down, I'm not a big like, I don't get inspired by like outside things really much.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm very practical, and so like when I sat down to compose, I'm like, I'm going to use this chord and that chord and see if I can make something unique with that.
Cool.
So limiting even those like compositional choices too.
Yeah.
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 That
yeah,
hits home. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, it's funny that you had the idea for that same quote. I mean, I think he really did nail it there. I stumbled across it, and actually, maybe this is how we both stumbled across it. I found it from Instagram. So there's this guy, Traveler. He posted that, and I was like, oh, I need to go. Maybe it's the same.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Okay. I mean, I
'cause-
just follow him in everything he does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel like he nailed it right there, and it really made me readdress how I look at music and how I look at sitting down and playing music. Because as you mentioned earlier, with paralysis, decision paralysis, all have the same thing, and I think I think I can let it be a detriment with my own music because I want to sometimes create very like technical progressive house music, and I have a couple guys who I really look up to, like Enzo Bennett and Deadmau5, who and Oliver Winters, and these guys who will layer like lots of different things, and when they come together, it makes this and so I can sit there and I'll have like a bass line maybe, or like a lower track, and then I'll improvise with the high end, and I'll have iterations where I'll go through 5 or 6 of those, and those could have all been decent, but I just get stuck. It's just and then the thing that happens by the end of it, it's all junk. If you can let yourself get out of your own way and just and try and just get into more of like a flow state and feel it, I really feel like the music will change at that point, and you can hit on some things.
One other thing, it's a new video he posted on his new album. He does this thing that I've like learned too, is when he builds a song, and my cousin does this production wise, is he builds like it all, like all the elements, and then all he does from there is he just subtracts. And so he doesn't start with like one melody then build from there, but he builds it all first, which helps me because then it's then you don't get in your own way, and like the end result is you don't have to write 10 melodies. You write one melody, then build layers, and then just pull them, and then make that the form. And so that's something.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
I
hadn't thought about that. Yeah.
I'll send you the video for sure. It was pretty eye opening seeing, and you actually can watch his like Pro Tools screen. And he shows how he built it, and it's like, I could have made that. Like that's not crazy.
Yeah. But he mentioned that. I watched an interview with him, and he was working with this guy, I forget the guy's name, but he did beats only, and he was like rolled around making beats. Yeah. So he had the guy make beats first, then he wrote over it, but then he removed the beats after and just was left with So then he gets the ideas from it, but he wasn't actually keeping that in the track. That's really cool.
And that's like his, that's, for me, that's refreshing to see. Even like the great people out there don't sit in a room all day and are just inspired 100% of the time, but they have to actively like find outlets to inspire them. Which is so important.
Oh yeah. I find the same thing. So Deadmau5 is a producer I look up to. I think I
watched his masterclass.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yep. So I think he writes just the most beautiful music, and he'll stream his sessions on Twitch, so you can watch him on Twitch.
That's sweet.
He's in this beautiful studio, but you'll see him banging his head against the wall, working on stuff, and he's like, no, fuck this, and he deletes it. So you see everyone across the board has it. No one's just sitting there and let me sit down and then it comes out. It's this process.
Beethoven didn't. I mean, those. It's still active. You gotta.
So here's something that I wanted to address too when I was thinking about this style of music, when you have the minimal components in a song. And so I'm a huge fan of classical music and piano in particular. It's like growing up playing piano, and when I was in school, I would listen to classical piano. So I'm a huge fan of it. And I think with piano, for whatever reason, that instrument has an amazing ability to really draw emotion out of people. I think better than other instruments, say guitar or bass or whatever. I think piano, for whatever reason, it just can translate that so easily. So having that piano as a tool, how do you address that process where you're like, I really want to pull feeling and emotion out with this given track? What's that process like? Because you go ahead. Yeah.
A lot of it's natural. Obviously I don't sit down and I'm like, I want to write like this emotion, but it comes from the emotions I'm feeling.
Hmm.
Um, but that's such a good question because like the more I do it, the more I realize I can figure out smart, effective ways compositionally to use the piano to my
Hmm.
advantage to create more emotion. Um, like it's the only instrument with like that full range of 88 keys, and
Right.
it can emulate the human voice. It can also emulate percussion. It can emulate an orchestra, which is
Hmm.
why I think it's such a unique instrument because it can encapsulate all these ranges, emotions, timbres.
Yeah.
Um, and so I mean, I guess it just being smarter and studying other people's music of like when I want to express a melancholy, what key do I use, what
Hmm.
range, what chords, what harmonies, what scale tones, just stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, honing in on being intentional about like the actual compositional like harmony and all that, rather than
Hmm.
just not thinking about that and trying to express emotion blindly. I don't know if
Uh-huh.
that answers your questions, but it's
No, it does.
very, yeah,
Well, it's a hard thing to address too, and I don't mean to kind of put you on the spot there because I think just like I think beauty through music is really tough to pinpoint as well. Like
yeah,
a person can write a melody and have a song, and it can be all right. That's cool, and then same list of instruments, and something fits there perfectly. And it's like, oh, that's it,
yeah,
you know. And there's this factor that is tough to really pinpoint, but
yeah,
it's gonna create all that emotional feel with, and it's subjective too, but it's gonna create all that emotional feel within a person. And there's something so interesting about that with music that I always like to address, but still it's
yeah.
almost
It's
impossible really to
it's
pinpoint, I
hard.
think.
It's
Yeah.
hard sometimes to talk about like why a song moves you to tears,
Yeah.
a certain song, and it's the more I do it, the more I realize it's non-quantifiable. Like you can't quantify it,
Yeah.
and you can't explain it, or else it
Hmm.
wouldn't be music. It'd be logic,
Yeah.
like if someone
Yeah.
asks
Yeah.
you like, why is that song great to you? Well, I mean, I can't describe it. You got to listen to it,
Yeah.
and that'll like show you. And I think, I mean, there's great pieces of music that have like touched me to my soul,
Hmm.
that I can't tell you why, but like, I mean, like what I was listening, what was it, Liszt B minor sonata, or like
Oh.
there's these certain like just
Yeah.
moments in
Yeah.
music that like drive me to tears or something.
Yeah.
And I think that's just the human quality, that like the power of music, that it can't be
Yeah.
explained, you know?
Absolutely. And when you listen to those like lists, like one of my favorites is Liebestraum from
Oh,
and Lang
I
Lang
played
playing
that a
it.
couple years ago.
Oh, that's a
Oh,
beautiful
it's,
song. It's
yeah,
yeah, one of my favorites. And there's a video of Lang Lang playing it, and he's so like emotive with his
he's
face
so
and like how
eccentric.
yeah, yeah.
He's so good
And
though.
absolutely. And th- if someone just played that flat, right, they just go through the motions, it would be totally different, right? It's all
Yep.
about like how he emotes through the playing, and it can create this whole other component of the song itself. So it's the player, it's the piece, they come together.
Yeah.
um it can be really really a beautiful thing. As
Yeah.
I speak more about it, just the minimal components with piano, really
It's
it's really really
revealing,
cool.
and it brings out the humanity in the person playing it.
Hmm.
Which is why like I want to stick to most all my music is the core of it is me at a piano,
Hmm.
rather than me sitting on a computer in a box, which I mean doesn't mean you can't get that
Yeah, it's
emotion in other ways. It's personally just for me, that's like
yeah
how I can express it. Yeah. So
yeah
it's
it's no,
there's
I mean, I
something
was
about
go
that
ahead, you go,
melody
yeah.
too. That melody in Liebestraum, no, is is
Oh,
is exactly what I'm like. I guess, I mean, we're talking about is like there's you can't explain that melody why it's
right,
great, but it's like
right.
we both are emotionally drawn to that.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's something. It's so fun for myself to have these conversations and be trying to do it in my own music at the same time, because it really makes you think, what the hell even is that? To is it the uniqueness in the chord progression that changes and then it catches your ear? I don't know. It is really really fun
yeah,
to think about, and for that reason it's so exciting to sit down and be, hey, I'm going to work on a new project, and where is
yeah,
this thing even going to go, you know?
for sure.
Yeah. So then when you're working on music, do you find that there are certain times that you are in a more creative state to write those given melodies that come later
Yeah.
and end up being on tracks? Yeah, what's
Um,
that like?
I for one cannot write. I really can't compose true to myself when I'm with people. So it's
Okay.
always when I'm alone, and that's mostly 100% like after midnight.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
I guess 90% of my music I've written like in the AMs early,
Yep.
in somewhere dark, just by myself with, yeah. I don't know. Like I don't have as much of a structure to creating as
Mhm.
some people. It's incredibly spontaneous,
Yeah.
where it's like I'll like randomly have a melody in my head and have to go to a piano and
Yep.
find it, or I'm improvising at like 1 or 2 a.m. and I like something and I stay up till 6
Yeah.
finishing it. Something like
Yeah.
that. So that's kind of my process or lack of a process.
Uh-huh.
But
No, that's cool. I found that actually is quite common too. Late in the night, that
yeah.
comes up more often. And it's funny. I'm thinking about a future episode, and I want to speak with someone who like studies sleep because there are
Oh
all these,
gosh.
because there
I
are
don't
all these.
sleep.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing because there are all these studies that show, for people that don't sleep often, it's detrimental to memory, all these things. I don't sleep either, so don't worry. But
We're
and they
dying young.
find right, yeah, but they find that having it hurts cognitive ability, but then all these producers who are making beautiful music are always sleep deprived. So
Yeah.
there's some funny
It's a
disconnect there.
dichotomy of like,
Yeah.
I mean, I have like I accompany and teach lessons during the day,
Uh-huh.
so some of it's like I'm forced to,
Uh-huh.
um, but I mean I think I still would,
Yep.
like
Yep.
late at night, and but
Yeah. I find the same thing. I love it when, my girlfriend's asleep, dog's asleep, lights are off, and I'm just
yeah,
there in my
solitude,
computer. Yep. Yep. It
yeah,
does make a real difference because you can I find I can zone out a little bit and really like lock into the music and kind of move out of
yeah,
my own way. And it makes a
yeah.
difference.
And one thing
Yeah.
I've noticed too, and like why I guess being alone, and maybe this probably for you too, uh, there's no pressure of pleasing
Mm-hmm.
somebody else, or like when I write or is someone there, there's always a little uncomfortableness that will dictate what I play or what I
Yeah.
compose. There's just that like effect of having somebody else and like thinking that in the back of your mind, and being alone is just purely you creating what you love, which is
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, yeah. I think when I'm working on music, luckily I'll like put my headphones on and I have the MIDI controller, but no one can hear it.
Yeah,
So I think if my
it's all
girlfriend's
you
watching, exactly, I'm in my own world if she's sitting on, watching TV or whatever. So,
for
but I
sure.
get that. Like if someone could hear if I was playing on a piano and someone was listening, oh,
Yeah,
I would
it
totally.
might change it. Yeah, it
Yeah.
change at least for me. I would write something to please what I thought they would want to hear or something.
Right.
But
Right. Yeah, that's super interesting. So it's funny. Everyone's like, yeah, middle of the night, except for one guy was like super early. So,
I wish
people
I
are
was
just
like that.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, me too. I'm not a morning person at all. I'll stay up all night and in the morning I'm just like I got hit by a train and I'm not awake till like I'll get to work at like 8, but I'm not really awake till
Yeah.
noon.
One thing I will
So,
say, the most effective compositional tool for me has been espresso.
oh yeah.
So, I
Coffee.
mean,
Oh yeah.
like legitly, that's the reason for many of, my
Yeah.
tunes.
Yeah. I'll drink. I mean, you might do the same thing. There was a time where I was drinking coffee at night. I was like, okay, I'm going to go work on music. I'll hit a coffee. I'll be up for 3 hours and then I could go to sleep. Yep.
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
it, man. It makes a huge difference.
Dude, yeah.
Yeah. And I notice with myself too, some people will have too much coffee and they'll get jittery or whatever. My neurological, like the chemical composition of my brain is perfectly suited for caffeine because I can just drink coffee whenever and I
Me
feel
too.
more creative. I really do. I feel like it
Yeah.
makes an
I
actual
mean, it's a
difference.
literal drug. It's,
Yep.
it's a literal grind too. Ha.
Yeah.
Funny.
Yeah, I know what I'll do for a podcast. It's bad. I mean, this is not good, but I'll have coffee. I had coffee an hour ago, so I had iced coffee when I got home from work, and then I have a beer, and then the
Dude,
two,
those
it's
are the
like,
two best, beverages
yeah,
there is.
I know, yeah, and it's like a perfect mix. That's exactly like
Yes.
I'm elevated with the coffee,
But you're
I'm
chill.
relaxed with the beer. Yeah.
What kind of
It's
beer?
so I got this Sierra Nevada Ocho Vez
Oh,
right here.
dude, I love Sierra Nevada
Dude,
Pale Ale is my favorite.
this
I
is
love
my
that
favorite
beer.
beer. This
Yeah.
is yeah.
I
You
grew
should
up
try.
actually
Yeah.
out there in California, in Orange County, and
Okay.
our family would always go to the Sierra Nevadas backpacking and camping, so like,
Oh,
you know,
cool.
takes me back
Yeah.
drinking it.
Yeah. I like this is a ghost style ale. It's good. I
I'll
like
try it.
ghost. Yeah, it's really good. It's
Yeah.
like limey and salty.
Dang,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. So I was reading a couple things, I read your bios in Spotify. And one thing you were saying is that your intention with music is to like it, get someone to feel as kind of as much as possible and emote music or emote emotion through that. So it, it ties into what we were kind of just speaking about. I know it's hard to pinpoint when you've like hit it, but what's that
Yeah.
feeling when you're working on something? You're like, okay, I know that this is really going to bring someone into that emotional state. Is it because you feel it too, or
Yeah.
what's that like?
So when I write, that's a really good question. I've been thinking about. When I'm in that state of like creativity and like like writing something that I think is of quality,
Uh-huh.
I'm never in it writing for someone else, and it's always like if I'm feeling in that moment, other people will.
Yeah.
And so I'm always thinking of like, okay, there's always that euphoric rush. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if like after you
Oh yeah.
create something you like, it's like you can't stop thinking about it, or I mean, it's just the
Yeah. Oh
greatest
yeah.
feeling
It's
in the
on.
world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so if I have that feeling with something, I know it's legit.
Yeah.
Because you can't really fake that feeling. At least for myself, I know it's like I gotta trust what I feel.
Yep.
And so when I write and I'm feeling it, and it feels like some quality, I don't ever start that process of thinking of if somebody else is gonna,
Uh-huh.
if that makes
That's
sense.
no.
I
It
always
totally makes
write
sense. Yeah.
personally to me, and then I'm like, okay, I just see other people's response, but it's
Right.
never a write for somebody else first, and then
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like the way you put that because I found with myself sometimes I'll work on something and I don't know if it's my internal. You can look at it a couple ways. So if I write something, I share it with someone and I get mixed reviews. They're kind of like, meh.
yeah,
Someone's kind of like, eh. And then another person's like, oh, I really like that. You can go back and say, well, I loved it when I was writing it. So should I really stick to where I felt there? It's like, hey, I
yeah,
like it, or is my internal,
yeah,
it's interesting to pair the two because you're like, you want to be honest with yourself, right? Am I misguided and I got too excited about something, and then they're a good person to kind of
yeah.
reference, or is it backwards?
I think there's a definite balance because I have a couple good friends who I always send what I write to, like the day after I write something, or
Uh huh.
the week of. I always send a couple of my buddies who are composers
Uh huh.
because I think there is some music that I'll write sometimes that like I'll trick myself into thinking it's good and it's horrible.
Right.
And
Right.
so I have a filter, but I think at the same time you can't hold too much weight because it is so
Exactly.
subjective. Where
Yep.
like I've shown a piece to somebody and they're like, it's decent, and then I'll show it to the same person. They're like, that's the best piece I've ever,
Yeah.
like of yours I've heard. So
Right.
I think actually like what I've came to find is if there's different opinions about it, that's a good thing.
Yep.
So somebody doesn't like it, and somebody does. That means that it's at least speaking to one person.
Right.
And
Right.
so I think it's you can't hold too much weight, but it's good to get outside opinion
Yeah.
in case you're, in case I let myself down,
Right. Right. And I think it's good too if you're getting mixed reviews. Sometimes it might also be that you're being very unique. Like sometimes people will write something and have, and I'll see they're like a famous producer or whatever, and 50% of the people don't like it. They're like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah,
But 50% love it, and it's because it's different. They're trying to do something different from the music they were creating before,
yeah,
whatever. So sometimes you need that. I mean, you can't please everyone too. That's part of
yeah,
it.
exactly. And I found that like on the other side of growing up listening to music, I was always mad when like a band came out with an album that wasn't like the stuff I loved.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
now on the other side, I'm like I could never write the same album 3 times in a row,
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And like I find that like you can't really dictate what you create
Mm-hmm.
if you're first thinking about your audience.
Yep. Yep.
As harsh as that is, like that's not being truly creative. And I think creativity is super personal to the creator.
Yep.
Like I'm not sitting down trying to exactly copy Olaf Arnold's,
Right.
because I'm myself and I want to express who I am. And so
Exactly.
that's
Exactly.
not it is for people, but it's not like the primary focus.
Right. Right. And I think if someone is going to just write purely for an audience, it's going to be totally watered down. It's either
Yeah.
going to be just a clear-cut copy of something else, or it's
Yeah.
not going to have their personal influence on it. So it's not going to
Yeah,
be,
absolutely.
you have to just do it for yourself, get in that creative space, write something that you love, and then set it
Yeah.
out there. Yeah.
Which that's the like the huge battle with wanting and to compose for a living is
Yep.
then you get into that finances and the like, okay, well, like
Right.
I have to compose for a commercial for the money. And
Right.
where you start to get to the practical side of how you write music, and it can battle that creative side
Oh,
a lot.
absolutely.
So that's like
Yeah.
something actually which in a way I've been blessed is that I have like I guess a day job teaching
Uh-huh.
piano and accompanying and all that, which it enables me not to have the pressure of the
Yep.
income,
Yep.
which can let me be free creatively.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like obviously the goal is to just sit and write music for a living.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully I don't want to
No.
ever, sell out, but
No, it's cool you mentioned it that way, because I find myself in a very similar position where I work a regular job, and that does remove a lot of stress. Then I
yeah,
don't have to, and I can totally do whatever I want. Like the music I'm working on right now, so I'm submitting a song for a remix competition. It has this really weird like lead line in it, but I like it, and I've
yeah,
showed it to my girlfriend. She's like, I like everything except for that. I'm like, well, I'm keeping it,
yeah,
because like I like it, and I'm not trying. I'm just trying to do right. Like I'm trying to focus more on like do what you enjoy, and then
yeah,
down the road, it's if you're just doing what you really enjoy, I think you're gonna end up appreciating it more too.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. With that being said, like. I have to find obviously a balance of like pushing myself to the point where I get to doing it full time because
Yep.
I believe I can, and I know that's like what I want to do. I mean, life is
Yep.
too short not
Yeah.
to, and so I think it's finding that balance and trying to when you do have the pressure, I think it can yield results too.
Yeah.
And so in
True.
the next
Yeah.
couple of years, I know I'm just gonna like, there's gonna be a moment I have to just,
Yep.
dive in, have faith, and go for it.
Yep.
Which is scary, but I mean, oftentimes that's when artists do the best. Their
That.
best
Yeah.
work is when they're like, in that pressure of having to survive. So
Right. Oh, that's such a cool. I totally was looking at the opposite way, but that's a good point. A lot of times when an artist or band's coming up, it's those years where they're like they got to make it happen.
yeah,
They're just like they're like
yeah,
grinding. They're just like totally putting all of themselves into it, and they're like we got to make this work. And then it's beautiful.
yeah,
That's such an interesting way to look at it. Just flipping it,
yeah,
with that pressure can come
yeah,
really
absolutely,
really
and
beautiful stuff. Yeah.
not getting used to living like being too comfortable. I think
Yeah.
sometimes, at least for me, I'm 26 and I don't want to be like doing the same thing
Yeah.
daily in a couple years, and so I mean, there's a point. It's scary, but
Yeah.
just go
Yeah.
for it. But
Yeah, you got to do, and it's cool in today's day and age where I think making music a full-time thing has changed for sure. I mean, that's
mm,
across the board. We're not selling CD discs anymore like 10 years ago at Sam
yeah,
Goody's. It's definitely changed, right? Everything's
I wish.
online. I know. So I've seen people who will do it in a different way. So one guy comes to mind is Julian Gray, who was on a previous episode two back, and he's released on Mousetrap, which is like Dead Mouse's record label. So
Whoa,
he makes
that's sweet.
amazing music, but he's addressed it where he has students that he teaches for electronic music production. He has a Patreon, so people support
Huh?
through Patreon. He does all
Oh
these
yeah, I've heard
different
of that.
things. Yeah. So he's addressing. He has a YouTube where he does like YouTube channel stuff. So and right now he's totally self-sufficient there, but it's because he like carved out all
Yeah,
these little
different
paths.
markets. Yeah,
Exactly. It's
niche. Yeah,
totally changed. Right. It's more like really connecting with an audience, and they feel like they know you, right? And it could be a small audience, but if they support you, then suddenly you can do that.
yeah.
It's not like you need to get signed to this ultra huge record label and tour to make.
hmm
There's all these different ways to do it,
There's
which
a
is really
ton.
cool.
Yeah, it's gives me hope. Because there's more opportunity. I mean, there's more people.
Yep.
But like someone told me this, saying that the niches are in the riches.
Yeah.
So wait, the riches are in the niches. Yeah, riches are in the niches. But I mean, like what that guy does is like my goal is like,
Hmm.
online maybe education. Like I'll
Yep.
always teach.
Yep.
The licensing thing is kind of the direction I'm going now.
Yeah.
Is I have these albums, might as well shop them
Totally.
around.
Totally.
And then like proactively trying to get into film composing too.
Yep.
Um, and so just finding a lot of different, I mean, freelance is
Uh-huh.
just finding a lot of different areas that add up to some big thing. Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, so that dude is doing exactly what my goal is
Right.
for
It's
sure.
cool. And it just I really honestly believe that if someone has the goal and they put in the work, I really do think it's there.
Yeah.
you know, I- and I spoke with him, I wanted to talk about that whole process of how he's gone about this. And he again, just committed to music when he was young and just was in the same boat. He's like, this is what I'm going to do. And with all that hard work over a long period of time, things fall into place. It doesn't
Hmm.
happen overnight, but that persistency or that persistent hard work towards that goal over time,
Yeah.
things are gonna
I,
things are
I
gonna work
was
out.
that's so true. I was listening to I think it was a podcast or something about like the similar traits with like successful people.
Hmm.
And the one thing that stood out was like not skill, not knowing people, but it was grit and
Yeah.
just having this grit of like, I'm just going to make it happen,
Yep.
as long as it takes. And
Yep.
like 100% of successful people have that, like where
Oh
they've
yeah.
had to do it themselves and drag.
Yeah, across the board. I like looking at those stories too, and they all say they got knocked down a bunch of times. They're like,
Yeah,
I tried this, it didn't work. I tried this, it didn't work. I was working. It's never like, oh, the first idea I had, it just
was great. Yep.
skyrocketed. Yeah,
That
it's this
first
hard
song,
work. Right, right.
went platinum.
Yeah, yeah. It's this hard work and just and working at it over time. And when you have those, you get knocked down or whatever happens, it doesn't work. You just keep working on it.
Hmm.
There's a famous DJ producer now. His name, how am I forgetting his name? Um, oh, what the hell? So I'll just tell his story. I'll think of his name here in a second. But he initially moved out to LA at one point, and he was going to take music full time, and it didn't work. Like he was living in a van, he was like sleeping on couches. I think he was even homeless at one point, totally. And he moved back. I think he actually lived in Arizona. Um, and so he moved back, but he kept working on it. And now he's like, he did the same thing. He moved back to LA, kept working on it. Now he's
Yeah,
ultra famous. Like
that's
it just
cool.
had, yeah, it had to click at the right time, but he just didn't give up.
Yeah, and I mean, 90% of people would, which
Yeah,
is yeah, that's good
right.
to
That's
hear.
it. Yeah.
Those stories are crucial, I think,
Oh,
to
yeah, for sure.
finding
For
people
sure.
like that where you can, model and follow
Yep.
that.
So kind of shifting gears a little bit into more moving towards like film, like composing for film,
Yeah.
composing for these different outlets that are more entertainment related where your music would be behind it. How do you how do you think about like writing music in that space? Because then you're kind of confined to
Mm.
a theme, right? If you're writing for a music or excuse me, a movie, you're confined to these certain parameters. Does that seem like it's something that would be like really interesting for you, or do you like the full range to just do whatever you want with a track? Or
Yeah, that's a good question. I've thought a lot about that. Obviously, it's one area where, I mean, it's like income. So
uh huh,
that's one area where I'm like, as a guy, a business, whatever, that's
yep,
smart. But I also don't want to do something that I'm not 100% in love, in love with or passionate. And I think film would be like on the one side, it's kind of what we talked about earlier, where it's instead of like debilitating creativity, I think it actually would add to it,
yeah, yeah,
because it's forcing you to write for this one scene. Is that, I mean, you're inspired by that like
mm-hmm,
external or that film or that emotion in the scene, and you're adding to it and
yep,
creating one product. So I think, yeah, I've never felt like it would be like it would confine me. I
mm-hmm,
felt kind of the opposite, where like when I'm sitting alone in a room with a piano, I can get just like, okay, what am I trying to express? But if I
yeah.
have like a scene or something that someone else is trying to emote and I get to add to it and complete it, um, that would be way more inspiring, I think, creativity,
Yeah. Yeah, oh, totally. I've thought about that. That's the reason I ask is I think it would be so cool to have those parameters
Yeah,
and then you're creating a feel for something that's also visual and the music behind it of course has such an important it's like such an important piece of the puzzle there, and they all come
Yeah.
together and make this really cool thing. I feel like it'd be really fun to do that.
Oh, it'd be a blast. And I'm actually like this week I have my first 3 I'm ever doing. So
Uh-huh.
it'll be a process, learning
Oh,
process. But yeah, finally like have a couple that I'll start on. Have no idea what I'm doing,
yeah.
but I'll
Oh,
get
that's
back
probably
to you and send them. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, that'll make it the most fun, man. Just like
Yeah.
dive into it and see what happens, you know?
Yeah, but I also think what's cool about film is at least like musically, like
Mhm.
the attention of the person doesn't have to be 100% on me, on the
Right.
music. I'm adding, I am like, expressing a character or emotion.
Yeah.
Where actually I think it frees you up, instead of
Yeah.
having to hold the attention. I mean, I could do a 2-note melody like in 1 octave for a
Yeah.
scene rather than like creating a whole like piece of music for an hour.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it frees you up for sure, to not, it doesn't put the pressure on you as the only like
Mhm.
form that someone's listening to, like an
Yeah.
album would.
Right. You're just totally focused into that given track.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just tying into that, listening to your music. I was texting my girlfriend about this earlier or the other day. Unearthed,
Yes.
that is like made for a movie. Like when I
Dude,
listen to that
thank you.
track, I close my
Yeah.
eyes. I feel like that song. Honestly, I'm not just saying this because we're on a podcast. That is like one of I'm like I've saved it. That's literally
Thank
one
you
of
so
my
much.
favorite.
That means a
Absolutely,
lot. That really,
it is.
yeah, I
It's really,
appreciate
really,
that.
really good. And
Um,
to me, I feel like pain through the song. Like it's this
yeah.
tension growing over the whole progression of the song and the structure of the song, like the chord structure. It's like painful. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's like that's the feeling I
Huh.
get. So totally fitted
That's
for a movie. Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's cool. How, like to hear how someone else perceives it.
Mm.
I've never thought of it like that. To me, that whole album actually, like compositionally, this kind of goes back to your first question. But that album was like a like sort of like my response to like it's all about reaching like
Uh-huh.
up to something you can't get. What I mean, whether it be like metaphoric or literal or faith or something, but like that song is literally just 1 chord progression,
Yeah.
but it starts in the middle of the piano and literally just
Exactly.
expands, and
Yeah.
so it's this like this organic growth
Yep.
and like I guess coming out and like expanding upward and down, and so like and I did it on the piano and the strings guy just absolutely just nailed it
Oh,
too, and
it's
so
yeah.
yeah, he did an incredible job, but that one's sweet, and it's so simple because it's the same chord progression
Right.
looping just back until it grows to like its climax. But
Exactly. Because the left hand you have it's like the same low end,
yeah,
but then you move through so
yeah,
the high gets higher, so it grows over time,
yeah,
and it's that very like circular chord progression. So it always feels like it's growing.
yep,
It just
yeah, and
it's beautiful.
I chose on that one to like to express emotion. I chose a lot of like non-chord tones.
Uh
So
huh.
like an F major in the left hand, I had like a C triad above it.
Okay.
So I had like that half step seventh
Yeah.
again. So just creating this tension
Uh huh.
so I wanted a tension and a reaching in that
Mm-hmm.
piece for sure. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of goes back to like I'm starting to learn how uh like compositional and harmony,
Mm-hmm.
like having a tool set of like what I can grab from can express an emotion
Yeah.
that I normally would just rely on my natural sense,
Mm.
but it like being more like educating myself on like composition can
Uh
actually
huh.
enhance emotional, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Like
Oh, that's cool.
being
Yeah.
a scholar,
Yep.
people think it's like two opposite ends,
Yep.
but if I know more harmonies that can express something that I'm trying to, then
Yeah.
it'll be like greater potential. But
Totally, totally. Yeah, because so I've always approached it more of just feel right. So
yeah,
when I was kind of forced to learn piano at a young age, I couldn't read music at all.
yes,
So everything, yeah,
smart
everything was just
parents.
by ear. My piano teacher would get so mad at me because I could not read music for the life of me.
I'm that
But
person now.
yeah,
My
yeah.
students.
So that's the thing is I totally go and feel like I don't know. I couldn't tell you like what chord I'm playing at the
Yeah,
time, but I know like that if I'm playing with my left hand, something fits. And a lot of times I'm writing stuff out on the MIDI controller too. So I'm like, okay, this fits with this. But that's so cool you mentioned that, because when you become a scholar of it and you spend the time and you educate yourself and you understand at a fundamental level what's going on behind the theory, then it can just add to the
Yeah.
arsenal, you know?
Oh, for sure. I always remember, like, I had one moment where it clicked. I had a class on, it was, I mean, not to sound like a bougie, but it was called Schenkerian tonal analysis.
Uh-huh.
And it was like taking apart like the greatest piece of music in this like crazy
Oh,
philosophical, intellectual, analytical. It was crazy. It was
I
over
would
my
fucking
head.
love that class. Oh
It
my gosh.
it was sick, but like the teacher teaching was just an absolute genius, like
Uh-huh.
of music. Like there's no way to put it. And she had studied music her whole life for years. And I asked her after, I'm like, does the more you know about music, like is it like lessen your enjoyment, like your naive enjoyment, like
Mm,
emotionally of it? And she says like it's enhanced her view of
yeah.
music on a like a an emotional response, which like clicked in my mind, like, okay, there's not these two, philosophical and like intellectual and
Uh-huh.
emotional, like they can all contribute. They're not like battling against each other, if that
Right,
makes
right.
sense. Yeah.
It totally does, because I think sometimes there's that notion that the person who's an extreme scholar, right, and they understand the music theory and all these different components of what a beautiful piece of music would be. Sometimes they can't write the music, you know.
Yeah.
But I don't think that that means that there isn't the overlap. Of
Yeah.
course, like if there's that person who's extremely creative and they have that innate ability to write beautiful music, but then they're well educated, they
Mhm.
understand foundationally
Yeah.
what's going on. I think it's powerful.
I think it's when being intellectual is your primary focus. I think that's when it
Hmm.
hurts and suffers. But I
Yeah.
think if you're like trying to emote and try and like feel it, when like that's first and your
Yeah.
primary focus, then it works. But I mean, you look at all like the like Bach, Chopin, they knew everything,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
they wrote with this feeling first.
Right.
And this,
Right.
yeah.
And I mean, Bach and Mozart, they were coming up with, they were like finding like chord progressions, right?
Yeah.
I'm not, yeah,
Dude,
exactly.
those,
So,
yeah.
right. So they were like understanding that. That is such a crazy concept to me, because they were understanding almost like objective beauty, really. Because,
Hmm.
you can have a chord structure and it sounds a certain way and it sounds pleasing, versus if you just play completely random notes, it can be garbage. It doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily have to be, like, because you can think of in a very improv way, completely random notes can be beautiful. But it's interesting for that reason, that they were at that forefront where they were looking at fundamentally, like, what is music.
Yeah, which
It's so
I
crazy.
like studying, and I was so lucky and blessed to study their music in depth. Is like people at their time didn't like their music.
Uh-huh.
They were like, and they were one of those like few people in history that
Mhm.
they were doing stuff no one else was.
Yeah.
Like at
Yeah.
like you said, at the forefront. Like I
Yeah.
can't think of really anybody now. Like not many people nowadays
Right.
are like looking at like literally doing what no one else is
Yep.
doing.
Yep.
That's good, but
Yep. No, I totally agree. I was watching last night. There's a documentary on Netflix called The 90s, and it was going through. I watched the episode on music, and it was showing when like grunge became grunge, like
yeah.
when Nirvana came onto the scene and how different it was from like the hair metal of the 80s. And it was totally new. Like it was like so groundbreaking. And now music's interesting, at least in that realm of like electronic music, and there's this whole melding of like rap, EDM, popularization of music, and there are new things coming out for sure, but it's almost like people are starting to mix things. And what I hope is not, and I know I'm wrong here, but I hope there's not like some limit to different like styles of things to be found.
Yeah.
Maybe even like in electronic music, because like dubstep is like, it all sounds, people are going to hate me that like dubstep, but like right now dubstep like
My
all sounds the
audience
same.
probably doesn't listen to dubstep.
Right. So, but
You're good.
yeah, but so I get this feeling that like there's so many like evolutions of music over the last 100 years, and it'll be really interesting to see what comes.
Yeah.
You know,
No,
I
I
guess that's
totally
a good way
agree.
to put it.
I
Yeah.
think maybe I'm wrong, and I'm not smart enough to like contribute to this, but like, I mean, maybe it's our access to information
Right.
via
And
social
so
media
many people are making
is,
music.
yeah, as they see, I mean, just being influenced by like literally being able to see what everyone else is doing rather than
Yeah.
like, I think Beethoven was in his house by himself,
Yeah.
not realizing what like Schubert did in the same city,
Yeah.
or
Oh, I didn't realize they lived in the same city. Oh my
yeah,
God, that's crazy.
I took a class, or I'm taking a class, because I actually failed it in my grad work. A dumb, like, well, not dumb, but a piano literature class, and we
Uh-huh.
were studying Beethoven last week, and just
That's
like they
crazy.
didn't even, know each other
At the same time,
existed.
they lived at the same time. They're
Yeah,
the
the
same
same
city.
time, the
That's
same
insane.
city, and
Oh
they
my
wrote
God.
completely different music, which
Wow.
is because they were writing true to themselves.
Yeah.
Which maybe is some of the problem is just like I hop on social media, I see
Mm-hmm.
what all my other composer friends are doing, and
Right.
I'm like, oh, they're successful. Maybe I'll try to copy that thing they do.
Exactly.
But
It's hard. It's so hard. I mean, of course, people are going to pull on different ideas from the genre that they like, right? I
yeah,
mean, it's not. It's almost impossible to be completely
it is.
like
Yeah,
new, right? So people are you're going to take inspiration from other people. There's a definite difference between taking inspiration and copying. I mean, there are people out there just trying to copy music. It's going to go nowhere, right? But
yeah,
that's an interesting point you bring up because so much access to information and also so many people making music. It's it's an interesting time because I think there can be so much content out there. It's hard to sift through, you know?
oh yes,
But at the same point, there'll be a given artist who builds a little community, and that community supports that artist. They love the
yeah,
music, and they're just living in their own little ecosystem. You never know they were there, you know?
yeah. That's a super cool way to put that. Yeah, I
Yeah,
love that thought of just
yeah.
finding that audience. But
One thing I wanted to mention is you're mentioning Schubert and Bach. Was it Bach or Beethoven? Bach.
Beethoven,
Beethoven. Schubert's Impromptu #3 is like my favorite of all
dude,
time.
yes,
That is so beautiful. Like that.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
cool to connect. I mean, no one I talked to here in
Oh.
Lincoln, Nebraska. Well, not no one, but like I don't. That's yeah. I love his
Yeah.
music.
Yeah.
Did you
Oh,
play?
absolutely.
Did you get to play like some like rep like that or?
So there was a time, this was like 4 years ago, where I could play like a minute of that, and I learned it
Dude,
all by
yes.
just looking on YouTube.
That's
And it's like,
impressive.
play this chord and play this chord. Because
Yeah.
I can't read music, so it was for memorization. After that, it was just like a minute in, but now I
Yeah.
can't. I consider
Dude,
yeah.
I mean,
So
speaking of that, man, I'll like contact you after, man. It's reading music is easier than you think.
oh,
Yeah, if you want
I,
lessons.
no, dude, I would appreciate it. I promise you, like my mom. So my mom plays piano. My mom
Yeah.
teaches piano too. So I mean, my grandma was a concert pianist. My dad actually was a singer, an
Wow.
opera singer, and he
I should
studied at
look them
Juilliard.
up. Well,
Yeah,
that's
I
amazing.
know. I know. So I have like my mom's actually a singer too. So they're both opera singers. So they thought I'd have this like phenomenal voice. I actually can't sing that well.
That's
I
fun.
like they're both amazing, and I'm not great, but I definitely got the music gene where I just
Yeah.
love it, and I love writing music and working on music as this side thing while I have my job. I would be I like having the podcast, having music outside work, especially, and of course like having my girlfriend and dog, all these different things. But without that piece, I would probably be depressed.
Yeah.
It's such a great outlet, and it's something where I can grow and all these things. I mean, I'm sure you feel the same way. Like if you
Yeah.
remove that piece from your life, it would be yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's my outlet for like expression, which is I think key to who we are as humans.
Yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
think that's our, being human is about creating and expressing and feeling.
Yeah.
But
Oh yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's been super cool, and this podcast. I mean, I get to have awesome conversations like
yeah,
this. It's
I'd have
it's
this conversation anyways.
oh
I
exactly.
mean,
No, I
yeah,
totally
I love
agree.
it.
Yeah, yeah. But it's cool when I think there's something. If we like, I think about this every once in a while. Like if we met at a bar and we started talking about music, let's say, it might last a little while, but things come up. People, then someone calls or like someone's on their phone or whatever. Like when you do these podcasts, everything's put away, and you're just there talking with this person.
Yeah,
And you almost get into a flow state when you're in this conversation, you like kind of tune
for
out a
sure.
little bit and like just zone in, and then suddenly like an hour and a half's gone by and you're like, what the hell happened?
Yeah, I
You
I
know?
wish like our society, like I mean, I wish I in my life did this intentional,
Yeah.
talked intentionally about what's important. Because you
Oh yeah.
discover a lot vocalizing it, and having to be asked like a certain like why you create or how you create,
Right.
which
Right.
is something we
Yeah.
don't do as much enough. But
Oh, I agree. Yeah. When you actually have to sit down and think about it and say it, it makes you think about it differently.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Well, dude, I really, really appreciate doing this. I mean,
Yeah,
this like flew by. We're like an hour and a half in, about something like that.
yeah,
Yeah. If we want to wait whatever 6 months, a year, and do it again,
yeah.
I
I'd
couldn't
love
be
to.
more
Yeah,
down, man. Yeah. Just talk
for
about new
sure.
music and talk about what's going on, and yeah,
Yeah,
super
email me
appreciate
some
it.
stuff or text me stuff and keep in contact for sure.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I'm totally down. All right, that's it for today's episode. Thank you to Philip for coming on. What an awesome conversation. What an awesome episode. I really enjoyed it. I hope that we definitely do this again. And I feel that same way with everyone who's been on the podcast. They all end up just being so cool. So again, thanks to him. And thanks to you for listening. This would not be anything without the listeners too. It's the guests, it's the listeners, it's this whole thing moving together. So I really thank you for tuning in, and I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that it was useful information for when you go and address your creative pursuits. So check him out, Spotify, Philip Daniel or Philip Zoch, that's Zach, or of course Instagram at Philip Daniel Piano, on Twitter at Philip Zoch. Now, again, next week, I'm going to be interviewing 28mm. He's a techno producer. That's going to be very, very cool. So look for that. And that's it for now. Again, share this if you enjoyed the episode. Share it with your friends, family. And if you don't mind rating on iTunes and leaving a comment, that makes a huge difference for the show. So that's it. Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate you listening, and I will speak with you all again soon.